In this report, we discuss overseas retirement mistakes you will regret forever. Today I was thinking about things that could happen or choices you could make that would cause a complete and irreversible failure of your early retirement overseas. These are not theoretical mistakes. Hundreds, if not thousands, of expats have already made these mistakes. Normally I'm a more positive guy, but I want to talk about the 6 big decisions and actions you need to think about carefully so you don't end up making a mistake that you will regret forever. Some of these mistakes you may be able to come back from. Others may turn out to be permanent. In my opinion, when you're making these decisions, you need to get some professional advice about how to protect yourself and others so you won't regret these decisions forever. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you what to watch out for and what to get local professional advice about. You see, laws are different all over the world. Just a few $100s in advice from the right professional in a foreign country could change whether you and others end up poor and hungry or sail smoothly through your remaining years of life. I've been living outside the USA since 2007. I've lived in and visited 67 countries. I will show you images of my travels while I explain overseas retirement mistakes that you may regret forever. Mistakes that could send you home early with only your hat in your hand, or worse. I will cover the most consequential and long-lasting mistakes last, so make sure to listen until the end. After I discuss the mistakes, I'll give you a strategy for picking a local professional advisor that's less likely to have a conflict of interest with you. Overseas retirement mistakes that you will regret forever. Okay, number 6, low strength, flexibility, or mobility. The truth is most of the retire cheap in paradise world is not as handicap friendly as your home country. There are large holes in the roads, broken and missing sidewalks, fewer street signs, fewer or completely missing crosswalks, and very few, if any, pedestrian signals that tell you when to walk or don't walk. Very few even have ramp sidewalks at street corners for wheelchairs. None of this is a big deal for healthy people in their 60s and 70s. But as we age, we lose strength and flexibility, and it becomes more difficult for us to maintain the ability to remain mobile as we walk around in these less developed countries. That means that you have to begin exercise now so you'll maintain your ability to move safely through poorly developed infrastructure. You have to be able to step up on steep curbs, step over holes in sidewalks, and get across streets rapidly in many parts of the world to remain safe. Exercise that maintains your strength, balance, and flexibility must be introduced into your daily life now so you can live in less developed parts of the world as you get older. If you have remained sedentary until now, that means you can easily add another 5 to 10 years of mobility to your retirement years if you take it seriously in your 50s and 60s. But if you wait until your 70s or 80s to introduce exercise that increases balance, strength, and flexibility, it will be much harder to get your body back into the shape each passing year. On the flip side, if you live in one of these retire cheap in paradise countries, you may be able to afford to hire a full-time assistant to help you with daily life, and later even hire a full-time and or live-in nurse. In some of these countries, a live-in nurse may cost thousands of dollars less per month than assisted living would cost in your home country. The important thing is to get started sooner, maintaining your strength and flexibility so you can remain mobile longer as you age. You should also begin to at least think about what it would cost and how you would pay for assistance as you begin to lose your mobility and even possibly your memory. The truth is, qualified nurses and personal trainers often work for a fraction of what you would expect to pay in your home country, but they're not free. So you need to think about how to add these 2 strategies to your overseas retirement so you won't regret having ignored these 2 mistakes when you're older and have less time to adjust. Okay, number 5, as we move to the more difficult mistakes, giving away your assets multiple times. My father was a marrying man. He was married 4 times and gave away half of his assets 4 times. Even if you start with $1 million, which my father certainly didn't have, and you divide it in half 4 times, you won't have enough left over to survive. So you need to think carefully about decisions that give away assets. This is not a man or a woman hate thing. This is just math. 2 of my sisters even made more money than their husbands, and one had to give hers half when they divorced. You don't even need to get married and divorce multiple times to give away your assets. You might just build a house for someone you love, and then they just ask you to move out. Your legal rights vary in each country, and you need to understand what the local laws are when you make these decisions. The laws are different all over the world. In almost every country in the world, there is a way to structure your life and transactions in a way that will protect your expectations, whether things go good or bad. For example, in many countries, you can structure real estate ownership so the house goes into your spouse's name upon your death. But if they leave you for another person before you die, you get to keep the house, which you'll need while you're still alive. There are various ways to protect both personal and real property, but you need to set the transaction up properly with advice from a local lawyer. In some cases, it may only cost you a few $100s to set things up in a way that you are protected if things don't turn out how you expected. You see, if you lose a good part of your assets at 80 years of age because of some nuance of law that you didn't fully understand when you structured a transaction in a foreign country, it'll be almost impossible for you to recover at that age. The older you get, the harder it is to recover from bad decisions. Some of you are probably thinking, but I really love my spouse. I want to take care of them. I think that's great. But if they really love you too, they're unlikely to object to setting things up so there are some basic protections in case things don't turn out how the 2 of you expect. You can even talk through these scenarios and agree on what should happen in the event things go bad at various stages. Your plan can take care of both of you at each stage if you get the right advice. Just letting things happen without any advice from a professional could put you in a vulnerable position when you are older and have no earning capacity. These kinds of decisions could turn into mistakes you'll regret forever. Just spend a little time getting it right so regrets are less likely when you are older. Also, you should read another report relevant to this topic that I have, Why Retired Expats Should Not Buy Real Estate Overseas. There's a link provided for that. Click the link in the notes below this video for Google Map links, reports, and other information. There you will also see our Retire Cheap in Paradise catalog, how we pay for our travels, and my free ebook, How I Fired My Boss and Traveled the World for 14+ years. 4. Unplanned children. When I travel around the world, I see expats in their 60s and 70s with small children and babies even. That can be a good thing. One said to me, I really screwed up with my kids from my first marriage. It feels great now to have a second chance. Other expats are not as delighted. One said, the baby was unplanned, and now I'm worried if I will live long enough to get this kid through college. If you are an older expat and you are not interested in raising a new family in retirement, you need to have a strategy for that. If you do not want to have children, you need to have a foolproof birth control strategy. If you just trust your partner to handle birth control, you may end up with young children when you reach retirement age. This is not as big a problem for expat women reaching retirement age for obvious reasons. But if you're a man, the only way to get sure, to be sure is to get a vasectomy. If you want a new family, all the power to you. But do think about what the strategy will be to pay for the cost of raising that child so they can have a great life, even if you pass away sooner than you expect. Can you get some life insurance that will pay your spouse to raise your child in a way that will give them a decent life? Just think it through before it's too late. Okay, number 3, no healthcare strategy. We're moving towards number 2 and number 1. As we age, healthcare expenses can become one of the most significant parts of our budget. In some parts of the world, the government covers health costs for their seniors, but that's rarely the case if you decide to retire outside your home country. So you need to think and have a strategy to pay for healthcare expenses if you decide to retire overseas. I'll give you some example strategies people use for healthcare. When we were in Panglao in the Philippines about 18 months ago, we met an American man that had been in the Philippines for over a decade. He had recurring back problems that were serious enough that he had to fly home to the USA to get an operation about every other year. So his healthcare strategy was to just keep his senior Medicare health insurance in the USA and fly back whenever he needed treatment. He would just fly home to the USA for expensive back treatments and surgeries. He also said he went to the doctor from time to time in the Philippines, but that those bills were never more than a few $100s. He just paid those out of pocket. He also said he purchased his medicine in the Philippines. He saved as much as 80% compared to what he would have to pay for the exact same drugs in the USA. Because the pharma industry is allowed to make political donations to US politicians trying to get reelected, and those politicians subsequently favor pharma over citizens, US citizens routinely pay some of the largest or highest drug prices in the world. So he was just buying his drugs in the Philippines where prices are much lower. Some of them were even the same brands that were much, much lower than they are in the US. Other expats around the world just get private health insurance in whatever country they decide to retire. Private health insurance outside the USA is routinely 50 to 80% cheaper than in the USA. Health insurance is often so much cheaper in many parts of the world because of the cost of medical treatment is so much cheaper outside the USA. So when something goes wrong, the insurance companies don't have to pay the hospitals as much. I was in the hospital in India for 5 days, and my entire bill was $1,600. That was for services that could easily have cost $40,000 to $60,000 back in the USA. Insurance companies have all this data. That's why health insurance is so much cheaper outside the USA. There's also a growing industry called medical tourism. Medical tourism is when people fly to other countries to get medical care because it's often better or just cheaper in other countries. Finally, some expats have decided to self-insure for medical. Self-insurance is certainly not for everyone, but that is what I've decided to do. I have another report that explains why I have decided to self-insure and how much money I've decided to put aside in case I have large medical expenses while living outside my home country. I explain that in another report, the 2 biggest risks of retiring overseas, link provided. You have to have a strategy for healthcare expenses so you don't end up with healthcare mistakes that you will regret. You don't want to have a life-threatening illness you have no resources to pay for. Okay, the number 2 mistake you might regret forever. No inflation strategy. You've probably been reading in the news recently that after 30 years of very little inflation, certainly in the US, things are changing rapidly. Inflation has begun to be a significant worry for people as prices have been rising rapidly over the last few weeks and months. If prices continue to accelerate in the coming years, the buying power of your retirement or pension would likely be eroded, making it harder to maintain the same lifestyle as you get older. Inflation in your home country is not likely to go at the same rate as in whatever part of the world you decide to retire. So if the dollar, the pound, or the euro remain strong relative to inflation where you are living, you're likely to be fine. The trouble would be if the purchasing power of your home country's pension erodes relative to your cost of living overseas. That could be a real problem. So you need to discuss your situation with a qualified advisor and make sure you have a strategy for both income and inflation protection. You see, as you get older and older, it becomes more difficult to start another source of income or return to the job market. So in addition to speaking to a financial advisor, try to live on less now while you can and begin to acquire some of the inflation-proof investments your advisor suggests. Some advisors suggest dividend stocks, gold and silver, and real estate as inflation hedges. They may also suggest ways to invest in these kinds of assets a little at a time, like real estate investment trusts and various kinds of dividend-paying equities that invest in these assets. And so ask your financial advisor about that. To fight inflation, I decided to make extra money teaching my hobby online. In fact, my online hobby presently makes about 3 times as much as I need to live overseas and travel the world. To find out more about how to turn any hobby into an income stream, watch my video, The Best Online Business for Retirees, link provided. Before I tell you the final mistake you may regret when retired overseas, I want to tell you how to pick an advisor that doesn't have a conflict of interest with you. How to pick a professional advisor. When making decisions overseas that could turn out to be mistakes you might regret forever, you need to pick the right advisor. Seeking advice from a licensed professional, lawyer, or otherwise that works only for you and that is a specialist in the subject matter of the transaction in the country you are retired. You should not accept advice from someone that has a conflict of interest with you. It's not unusual overseas for someone that's encouraging you to make a life-changing decision to refer you to a lawyer for advice. In that case, the referral itself may be a conflict of interest. For example, if your real estate broker in a foreign country refers you to a lawyer, that lawyer may sugarcoat the advice they give you so that the deal closes for the broker. The lawyer is motivated to do that because they know the broker will keep referring people to them if deals keep closing. So find your own lawyer to reduce the possibility of a conflict of interest. Another example is when you are structuring some kind of relationship or premarital agreement, don't use a lawyer referred to you by your new love or their family, their friends, or anyone else that could be motivated to influence the terms of that agreement. Find your own lawyer. That is likely to lower the chance of a conflict of interest. Okay, finally, the number 1, attaching too deeply to a country too soon. Some of us get this idea stuck in our head that there's one perfect place in the world for us. I think it's great to do research to reduce the number of countries down to 3 to 5 countries to visit before we pick our favorite to retire. But I don't think it's wise to reduce the number of countries you're interested in down to 1 country and just move over there without visiting other countries. Experience tells me that if you reduce it down to 1 country and you just go to that country and retire, you'll never really know if you are in the right place. Imagine if you married your high school sweetheart and never had sex with anyone else ever before you get married. Don't you think you would wonder what sex was like with others? I certainly would. I just think if you date a few other countries before you get attached deeply to a new country, you'll know why you picked that country. When things get rough from time to time after that, you'll remember what you loved about that country more than the others, not just on paper, but also in real life because you experienced it. I think an informed decision like that has a better chance of lasting longer. I suggest doing what I call an exploratory visit to your top 3 to 5 countries before getting attached too deeply to any one country. I know what some of you are thinking, Dan, I can't afford to travel all around the world like you do. And here's what I think. I suggest you read my report on what we spent in 2020 traveling around to multiple countries before you decide whether or not you have enough money to travel to multiple countries. There's a link provided. Okay, thanks for reviewing my report, Overseas Retirement Mistakes You Will Regret Forever. Make sure to grab a free copy of my ebook, How I Fired My Boss and Traveled the World for 14 plus years. This is Dan of Vagabond Awake, the YouTube channel for vagabondbuddha.com. The world is your home. What time will you be home for dinner? Hey, if you liked our video, please like, comment, or subscribe. Any of that would help our business. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.